All right, let's just get right into it. Have you ever been staring down a perfectly glazed donut, or maybe a warm chocolate chip cookie, and you feel this almost magnetic pull? You know you shouldn't. You probably even promised yourself you wouldn't. But man, in that exact moment, the immediate temptation of sugar is just completely overwhelming. So why is our brain wired to struggle so intensely against instant gratification, even when we absolutely know better? Because the reality is, the long-term health costs of giving into that instant sugary gratification are massive. A really comprehensive umbrella review recently published in the BMJ confirmed direct associations with things like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, gout, ectopic fatty accumulation, dental caries, and get this, even certain cancers. The data is crystal clear here. Our inability to resist that momentary pleasure carries a huge, heavy toll on our long-term health.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating cognitive and behavioral mechanics behind our ability, or let's be honest, our inability, to wait. We're going to dive into the science of delayed gratification to understand exactly why we're wired this way, how our brains process temptation, and most importantly, how we can actually train ourselves to get better at it.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the marshmallow test.
First up, let's look at the core definition. Delayed gratification is, simply put, the ability to resist the temptation of an immediate reward in favor of a more valuable, long-lasting reward later on. It's all about foregoing a smaller, immediate pleasure to achieve a larger or more enduring benefit down the road. Basically, it's the exact opposite of caving to that sugar craving we were just talking about. Now, notice how there are basically two opposing forces in our psychology constantly battling it out. On one side, we have delaying gratification, that's the ideal scenario. But on the other side, we have what behavioral scientists call delay discounting. And this is our natural, built-in preference for smaller, immediate rewards. It's this wild psychological phenomenon where the subjective value of a reward actually drops the longer we have to wait for it. Think about it. If you have to wait a whole year for $100, suddenly that $20 bill sitting right in front of you looks a lot more appealing, right?
To see this play out in the real world, we have to look at Walter Mischel's legendary Stanford marshmallow experiment from the 1960s. Researchers offered 4-year-olds a pretty simple choice. Eat 1 marshmallow right now, or wait 15 minutes alone in a room and earn 2 marshmallows. Well, fast forward to their teenage years, and the kids who managed to wait, the high delayers, had higher SAT scores, better social competence, and were way better at coping with stress. Fast forward again to adulthood, and those exact same individuals had a lower body mass index, lower divorce rates, and fewer addictive behaviors. Waiting just 15 minutes as a toddler literally seemed to predict lifelong success.
Moving on to Section 2, hot versus cool processing.
So how exactly did those kids actually manage to wait? I mean, what was going on in their heads while they stared down that marshmallow? The key here is understanding the cognitive affective processing system, or CAPS. This model essentially divides our regulatory strategies into 2 camps. First, you've got hot processing. This is emotional, it's impulsive, it's automatic. If a kid sat there focusing on the gooey, sweet taste of the marshmallow, they were using hot processing, and surprise, they almost always ended up eating it. But then you have cool processing. This involves calm, controlled cognitive strategies. The successful kids used distraction. They covered their eyes, they sang songs, or they completely restructured their perception, like imagining the marshmallow was just a fluffy, inedible cotton ball or a little white cloud.
And this cognitive battle physically plays out right inside our brain anatomy. When you see a sugary treat, the ventral striatum, which is located deep in the midbrain's limbic system, just lights up. This is your pleasure and reward center. It is entirely hot and reacts instantly to the potential for immediate gratification. To resist that, you actually have to activate the prefrontal cortex. That's the front part of your brain associated with reasoning, rational thought, and directing your attention. It is the biological home of your cool processing.
Let's just pause on this thought for a second, because this is absolutely crucial. Resisting temptation isn't some passive state of doing nothing. It is a highly active process. The prefrontal cortex must actively override the limbic system's basic instinct for instant pleasure. In fact, in functional MRI scans of adults who were high delayers back when they were kids, researchers literally saw greater activation in the prefrontal cortex when they were asked to suppress impulses.
Which brings us to Section 3, is willpower just wealth?
Okay, so for decades, the accepted story was that willpower was just this innate trait that basically determined your destiny. But let's introduce a fascinating plot twist to the classic marshmallow test narrative, because recent scientific reviews have fundamentally flipped how we view this. While innate willpower was originally believed to be the primary driver, newer data paints a much more complex picture.
A massive replication study in 2018 and even more work in 2024 totally challenged the predictive power of the original test. It turns out a child's economic background actually explains about half of the effect. Plus, another study looked at reward reliability. If researchers previously gave kids poor quality art supplies after promising them good ones, those kids' wait times on the marshmallow test plummeted from an average of 12 minutes down to just 3 minutes. So, environmental factors, wealth, and basic trust heavily influence our ability and our willingness to wait.
There's also some much-needed nuance we have to throw in here. As psychoanalytic researcher David C. Funder points out, delayers are in general smart and well-adjusted, but they also tend to be somewhat over-controlled and unnecessarily inhibited. He kind of hit the nail on the head. While delaying gratification is usually adaptive, being a high delayer isn't always absolute perfection. Rigidly denying yourself every single pleasure at the cost of immediate joy? That isn't exactly healthy either. Sometimes a little instant gratification, in the right context, is totally fine.
And there's actually a deep evolutionary reason for that. You see, our struggle with delayed gratification is rooted right in our survival mechanisms. Think about it. Out in the wild, being patient carries massive risks. If an animal waits around for a piece of fruit to get perfectly ripe, there's a really high interruption risk, meaning another animal might just come along and steal it. Or worse, there's a termination risk. A predator might show up and end the game entirely. So grabbing those calories right now conveyed a very clear evolutionary advantage to our ancestors. Let's wrap things up with Section 4, Training Your Self-Control.
So, knowing all this about our biology and our environment, where exactly does that leave us? Well, here is the most empowering perspective from contemporary clinical psychology. Self-control is quite literally like a muscle. It is entirely malleable. You are not locked in to whatever willpower you had at age 4. Therapies for anxiety, impulsive behaviors, and even ADHD use behavioral modification techniques that actively train individuals to tolerate discomfort and practice delaying gratification. You can absolutely strengthen this cognitive muscle.
Okay, so how can we turn this into practical steps the next time you face that massive sugar craving? Step 1, recognize the immediate urge. Just notice your limbic system firing up. Step 2, deploy those cool distraction techniques. Turn your head, look away, or reframe the treat. Remind yourself it's really just a combination of processed chemicals. And step 3, which research shows is the most effective strategy. Imagine a competing, highly desirable future reward. Focus your attention heavily on the long-term benefit of just saying no.
And hey, if you need a little extra motivation for that future reward, keep this number in mind, 0.2. In the original marshmallow study follow-ups, every single minute a preschooler waited translated to a 0.2-point reduction in their body mass index 30 years later. Those minutes of utilizing cool thoughts literally compound over a lifetime.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We know our ventral striatum is evolutionarily primed to grab the immediate reward, whether that's escaping a stressful task or eating a sugary treat. But we also possess a highly evolved prefrontal cortex capable of remarkable focus and restraint. So, are we victims of our evolutionary biology? Or are we the masters of our cool thoughts? The science says the choice and the ability to make that choice is entirely in our heads. Thanks for watching this explainer, and I hope it helps you flex that self-control muscle just a little bit more today.